Fork in the left, knife in the right, dining like you're performing surgery. Given how handy chopsticks are, why don't foreigners like using them? Whether it's picking up food, shoveling rice, deboning fish, or tossing noodles. They can even pick meat out from the tiniest crevices and bones. The dominance of chopsticks on the Chinese table is almost ridiculously absolute. But in the West, you need a knife for steak, a fork for meat, and for soup. A dedicated spoon for just one meal. The array of utensils is more elaborate than the dishes. It stands to reason that chopsticks are lighter, more flexible, and more convenient. They're also highly versatile. So why have they become exotic utensils in the West, reserved only for Chinese or Japanese cuisine? Is it that Westerners truly don't like chopsticks? Today let's take a deep dive into these essential tools of the trade. These are the world's mainstream eating utensils. Have you noticed what they all have in common? Whether it's knives and forks or just using your hands, they are all intuitive and require zero learning curve. From a design perspective, this is very interesting. In product design, there's a famous principle called polka yoke foolproof design. It means designers must consider the user with the lowest skill level and optimize the product accordingly. Therefore, in many cultures, eating utensils are designed to be understood at a glance and mastered instantly, a classic foolproof approach. A tool with a learning threshold like chopsticks couldn't have become a mainstream everyday utensil, yet the Chinese not only adopted them, but turned them into the most natural and efficient part of daily life. I'm currently participating in the featured creator selection event. Please head over to Douyin Selection and cast a vote for me. Thank you so much. So why did the Chinese choose chopsticks as their primary eating utensils? To answer this, we need to turn back the clock to the Neolithic age. As far back as this period, the Chinese were already using knives and forks at archaeological sites like the Kajia and Hemudu cultures. Experts have unearthed bone knives and forks that look remarkably similar to modern Western setsa. They were also used for cutting large pieces of roasted meat. But why did we eventually phase out knives and forks? It's because our agricultural structure and cooking methods were constantly evolving, and our eating utensils upgraded alongside them. The heartlands of early Chinese civilization were the Yellow and Yangtze River basins. Here, the tech tree for millet and rice was unlocked quite early. These grains could be cooked whole, without grinding, becoming soft and palatable when steamed or boiled. More importantly, to save both fuel and time, the Chinese used tools like axes and adzes to chop food into small pieces. Everything was tossed into a single pot to be stewed or steamed, then shared by the whole family. Since the meat was already bite-sized and the staple grains were small, was there any need for a knife to cut or a fork to hold food in place? Of course not. With just 2 twigs or bamboo sticks, a simple pinch is all it takes to eat. It's simple and efficient. This is the logic behind the birth of chopsticks. They are actually a product of a highly developed agricultural civilization combined with a collectivist dining culture. As for knives and forks, they are the result of the Western dietary structure, cutting habits and table manners evolving over a long period. In many parts of Europe, the agricultural foundation was wheat and livestock. Wheat was ground into flour for large loaves of bread, and beef was roasted into thick steaks. When faced with a tough steak or a whole baguette, besides poking a hole, chopsticks are useless for holding it. At this point, you need a steady fork to hold it in place and a sharp knife to cut it open. Essentially, the popularity of cutlery in Europe evolved to accommodate a dietary structure centered on large portions of meat and bread. In fact, until the early Middle Ages, commoners in Europe still ate with their hands. Forks were merely luxury items for aristocrats to show off their status, and were even condemned by some as tools of the devil. The logic was that food is a gift from God. Using a fork was disrespectful, and eating with your hands was a sign of true piety. It wasn't until the early modern era, as table manners evolved, that knives and forks truly entered ordinary households. So Westerners aren't born knowing how to use a knife and fork. It takes practice too. It's just that they develop a different set of skills. Returning to our initial question, if chopsticks are so versatile that they outperform cutlery even at tricky tasks like picking up tofu, why haven't they become the global standard in the wave of globalization? This brings us to a concept from social sciences: switching cost. For a German raised on eating bread and cutting steaks, asking them to abandon the utensils they've used for decades to learn a completely new muscle memory system is simply too costly. More important, Western dietary structures haven't fundamentally changed in nearly 1,000 years. As long as their plates feature whole steaks and large salad leaves, knives and forks remain the optimal solution. Look at India, the Middle East, and parts of Africa, where eating with one's hands is still common in these low-latitude regions. Staple foods are often various flatbreads or extremely thick mashes, such as various types of curry. They prefer eating flatbreads or wraps directly by hand, or using their fingers to mix rice and curry into balls to eat. If you wanted them to switch to chopsticks, setting aside the fact that it goes against their cultural inertia, the nature of their food simply isn't suited for it. But here's the interesting part. Even though chopsticks don't necessarily pair well with their local cuisine, more and more foreigners are proactively learning how to use them. When Keir Starmer visited China at the end of this January, nearly all of his 140-member delegation used chopsticks during meals. The cutlery provided by the restaurant remained largely untouched. Furthermore, when dining at Chinese restaurants abroad, using a knife and fork might even draw smirks from other diners. This isn't necessarily because using cutlery is inconvenient, but rather because within a specific cultural field, using the appropriate utensils signals respect and the etiquette of doing as the locals do. Those British politicians are as shrewd as they come. Do you think they don't realize that knives and forks are easier for them? Of course they do, but they have to put on a show of knowing how to use them, appearing like a seasoned foodie who knows the drill. Also, surprisingly, the modern habit of being glued to smartphones has actually provided a new boost to the global popularity of chopsticks. Nowadays, people love to scroll through their phones while picking up food, and when it comes to the convenience of one-handed eating, chopsticks are unrivaled, because using a knife and fork requires both hands working in tandem, or at least one hand to hold the plate steady. For modern people used to one-handed phone operation, needing the other hand to cut food. It is indeed counterintuitive. Meanwhile, with the explosive global growth of Asian cuisine, foods like sushi, ramen, malatang, hot pot, and pho are naturally designed to be eaten with chopsticks. Consequently, in major cities across Europe and America, the proportion of the younger generation using chopsticks is noticeably on the rise. To enjoy these delicacies, they are more than willing to overcome the learning curve. Furthermore, from a medical perspective, using chopsticks is actually an excellent workout for the brain. It's not as simple as just using two sticks to pick up food. It requires the coordination of intrinsic and extrinsic hand muscles while engaging the shoulders, elbows, forearms, wrists, and fingers in a seamless, synchronized motion. Brain imaging studies have also shown that using chopsticks activates brain regions associated with motor control, motor planning, and sensory integration. This might be one reason why East Asians are often perceived as being particularly sharp. In short, chopsticks haven't conquered the world just yet. Not because they aren't good enough, but because human taste buds and stomachs are incredibly stubborn. Everyone clings fiercely to their own localized culinary traditions and refuses to let go. So in the future, it's unlikely that chopsticks will replace knives and forks. Nor will forks eliminate eating with hands. Instead, it will be an era of fusion. You can see people in New York using chopsticks for ramen, and people in Tokyo or Shanghai using knives and forks for steak. Even in high-end Indian restaurants to accommodate tourists, both chopsticks and silver cutlery are provided. Utensils are not a measure of how advanced or backward a civilization is. The only difference lies in choosing the right utensils for the food you're eating. Use chopsticks for hot pot, a knife and fork for steak, and your hands for crayfish. Does eating hot pot with chopsticks make you more sophisticated than eating steak with a knife and fork? And is eating crayfish with your hands considered the lowest form of dining? Of course not. The most important thing about a meal is enjoying it. Just eat, however, makes you happy. After all, being able to pick up a single peanut with chopsticks is certainly a master skill, and perfectly carving a steak with a knife and fork is quite a talent too.